Well, happy Friday, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of Indie Game Business. I am Indy, and the gentleman next to me is Mr. J. Powell from Powell Group Consulting. And welcome to Indie Game Business. We have Chris Hewish, who, did I say that right? Hewish?
Hewish. Yep, you got it.
Hewish, who is the big boss over here at Xsolla. So don't make him mad because he'll come after you.
No, and I was just saying before we went live that we, truly appreciate Xsolla. They've been, one of our sponsors that have been with us since the very beginning, before anyone knew what the hell we were doing when we were talking about doing digital conferences, and they're like, "But that's never going to work."
Right?
Apparently, it
did.
So
thank you so much. Also, we are sponsored by Tripwire Presents.
Yes,
we would like to thank them as well.
We love everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So, Chris, let's start with like my favorite question always. Tell us how you got into the industry initially, and then walk us through your career up to this point.
All right, Jay. Well, I got into the industry really just through a love of games. I, as a kid, was lucky enough to move to a really small town up in the freezing region of Maine. And they had this game store in there called the Toy Soldier. And that was like my haven. And I spent every day after school, all my weekends there, learned how to play board games, historical miniatures, D&D, all of that. And also really got a good sense of game design and game theory, and was able to leverage that to get a job in the games industry. And from there, it's just been an awesome journey, worked with a lot of really cool, smart people over the years, and learned a lot of great lessons. That first job in the industry actually was at one of the companies that still is one of my favorites, it's Games Workshop. And that was a job, and that was a job that I got with kind of my first lesson, which was sort of passion will really carry you far, even passion over ability. And that was one where I loved the company, loved their product, had no idea how to get a job there. So I sent them just a resume fresh out of college with a letter of recommendation from a fictional orc war boss, and they loved it. I wrote this letter, like one of their orc war bosses. They loved it. They loved the passion and brought me in, and that's where things kind of took off. And so that was quite a while ago. And from there, I went over to a games company called Microprose, got onto sort of the design track with designing games. And that was another example of where I went in there, really didn't meet the qualifications of a game designer because I had never worked with computers or with software. But I went in and I said, "Hey guys, I know a lot about design and design theory, and I've worked at Games Workshop. I'm willing to bet it's a lot easier to teach someone how to design, how to work with a computer, right, and about the software side of things than it is to teach them about just how to design games." And they agreed and brought me in, and that was awesome. And got into producing after a while. Went to Activision for many years. Got into sort of the entertainment space, with companies like DreamWorks, and then ran a couple of studios, Servios, Skydance Interactive, and then kind of went over to the dark side of B2B, and that's where I am now with Xsolla.
Well, I mean, it's not completely the dark side. That's where I've been for 25 years. So, but that's fascinating because, yeah, I'm with you. You've actually hit on a lot of the companies that I loved growing up, Games Workshop and especially Microprose. I mean, some of my fondest memories of high school, college was playing everything from Civ through God knows. I mean, if it came out of Microprose, it's like I probably played it at some point in time. I didn't mean Civ. There was another one I was thinking of.
Yeah, Civ was there, and oh man, of course now I'm blanking, right?
Oh yeah, same here. It's like I can see that logo perfectly in my head, but I cannot remember all the freaking games. I know a lot of the flight simulators. I played the hell.
Oh yeah, F-15 Strike Eagle.
Yep.
On the flight sim side, there was Dark Reign, which was an early RPG, like a historical / fictional Germanic setting, which was amazing. And then there were a number of strategy games that came on after that. Yeah, so there was a lot of fun stuff.
So you're also you've hit in a lot of different areas of the industry. So it's like, yeah, I tell people it's like I know a whole lot about the biz dev side of games, but that's pretty much the extent. I've done a little bit of design. I've done more producing and executive producing than I care to have ever done again. But being able to hit all these different disciplines gives you a very well-rounded view on the industry. So tell us when you started Xsolla and why did you do it? What was the initial reasoning and emphasis behind it?
Yeah, so I joined Xsolla. It's been almost 3 years now, and the company itself has been around for, oh gosh, I think 16 years, 17
Yeah.
years. But it really saw a lot of, it really kind of took off about 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Anyway, what drew me to Xsolla is the fact that they're working at a scale, an entirely different scale than I had experienced before. Either working on individual games or even a slate of games. Maybe I had 10 or 12, games at any one time that I was kind of overseeing or working with when I was on more of the content creation and publishing side of it. But going over to Xsolla, we're working with thousands of games. And we're doing that by helping them all go direct to consumer with different payment solutions and all kinds of cool things, right? Being able to run your own, online stores and e-commerce and all that fun stuff, which we can dive into later. But what was really cool is, as you said, being able to have a career where I've touched all these sides of design and producing and biz dev and marketing and sort of publishing. It's like, wow, there's a whole segment of this business that has been I've been blind to, which is the commerce side of it. And coming over to Xsolla really has given me a chance to explore that and learn all about like different, payment methods and global reach and just audiences around the world and how many players there are out there that we just take for granted that aren't able to actually engage with your game because they're not that they're unbanked, but they don't have like tier one banking, right? Or they don't have a Visa card or PayPal account or something. And just being able to see these games just worldwide at scale was really appealing. And honestly, and you can appreciate this. You've been in the industry long enough. At a certain point, it becomes critically important to kind of work somewhere where there's no, there's a low sort of a-hole factor. So this is a company. And it's like, look, we don't have too much time left doing this, so I don't want to spend it with people I don't like. And Xsolla has a lot of people I like, which is really cool.
That is exactly one of my keys to working with, whether it's clients on the Powell Group consulting side or, folks in the conference or people in general. It's like life's too short to have to work with a bunch of people you can't stand.
Right.
I had a good friend of mine many, many years ago introduce me to the asshole tax. And it's like if you're putting a bid in for something, and this was like contract work back in the day, and they're going to be a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
You just tag on a little extra to make it work.
What is that tax? Is that like 10%?
It depends on how big of an asshole you are, Chris. That's the and whether or not I've had to deal with you in the past. I mean, but I had never thought about that, and I was like, oh my god, that is absolutely brilliant. I love that, and so we still use it to this day. The commerce side is almost like the ugly duckling of even the BD side, which is always called the ugly duckling of game development in general. But as the industry is expanding and growing, I mean, yes, you're right. There are millions of people out there who are gamers, but they don't have a credit card or a PayPal account. So which markets, are you seeing the most growth in coming up to the industry, markets that people don't typically think about when they look at games?
Yeah, that's a good question. When really, Latin America is an interesting one, right? Brazil is a classic market where there's a lot of gamers, but if you look at the App Store, there's not necessarily a ton of revenue that comes out of it when you're talking mobile, and that's partially due to the fact that a lot of them just don't have the standard, sort of financial tools that we take for granted. You start to look in a lot of tier 2 countries, tier 3 countries in Southeast Asia, sort of Africa, just other just other parts of the world outside of your sort of eFigs kind of English, French, Italian, German, Spanish. That's from the old translation days, right? When you're going to localize your game,
Oh
you do it in
yes,
eFigs, right?
I very well remember eFigs. Yeah.
And when you get outside of that, there are a lot of players, and we estimate, when even Japan for that matter. I was just talking with somebody the other week, and we were going through a number of countries, and a massive percentage of the players in a country like Japan are using local payment methods that normally are not connected into the different third party platforms that games get distributed on. So if you sort of aggregate that number worldwide, we're estimating, somewhere between 30 and 40% of the player base out there is simply unable to spend on your game, even if they want to, right? And that's just easy money if you can really open up access to those players so that they can start spending on your game. It's a no brainer.
Yeah, it's interesting because you hit like one of the big ones that are always top of mind for me, and that's in Latin America, Central America, South America. Because I was just down in Mexicali for GammaCon, and fantastic, group developers down there, big long track record in the industry of doing like contract work and art outsourcing and back end networking and things like that, but they don't have as many options for original games that have come out of it. And so as a result, they don't there's not this institutionalized knowledge that the rest of the world who's been in the core of this for years have. And so anything that can get in there and help not only educate and support those teams, but get more players going on and things like that, because they are absolutely huge markets. And going back to the efix thing, far bigger than like the Italian market or the Spanish market we always think of. But yes, I mean the monstrous size um, industries down there. So I
Yeah.
mean, what sorts of things do you see as ways that we can help grow these areas? And I know because Xsolla does a lot of the investment, support and things like that. There's a lot of things that you all do that a lot of people may not realize that you do. They just think of you as just that commerce company.
Right.
But yeah, let's dive into that just a little bit. What are some of those other things that y'all been working on to help support communities like that, but also the industry in general?
Yeah, absolutely, Jay. So, first and foremost, we love to go to conferences, and we have a great team. We try to hit up as many of them as we can to go in person and actually meet developers, right, face to face, understand what their needs are, and figure out how to help from there. And whether it's us helping or us using our network of connections to help them. So, when you ask how can people help, it's and I know we were talking about this right before the show, just traveling, or even if it's digital or in person, but just really taking the time to meet with indie devs wherever they are, and just hearing what their pain points are, right, and finding ways to address those. And some of the ways that we're doing that is, we love being involved in hosting contests or pitch sessions. I know you do a lot of pitch session work. It's a great way to get connected with people and give visibility, but at the same time give feedback and help with networking. We've just recently launched a Accelerator program where we're actually starting to fund some developers and bring them into more of a traditional accelerator kind of environment and connect them with experts to help them not just help with funding, but help them grow their game and get it along and get a good go to market strategy and all of that. And then we also help with things like trying to connect with funding. We have a good friend of both of ours, Justin Berenbaum, has been building this funding club at Xsolla for a number of years, and that's something we don't even financially benefit from, but we provide a matchmaking service where since we go to all these conferences, we talk with so many devs, we see really cool games, and the ones that we think really are interesting or the team is great, we'll bring them to the funding club, which is I think over 130 or 150 now, publishers, investors, and we'll say, hey, here's kind of a pre-screened, some pre-screened games and teams think you should talk, and then we'll step back from there and let all the magic happen. And then we have some other stuff that we're working on to just, again, try to create a platform to connect indie devs with investors and all of that. So yeah, we definitely have been busy on that front.
No, it is awesome that there aren't a lot of companies that do, that sort of exposure for teams that need to get funding, like you and Justin do with the funding club, and you're not like taking a 10, 15, whatever percent cut on the back end. It's like, no. We're legitimately just doing this to, help you all along and help go. And I think, with the accelerator, and let's talk a little bit more about that in general. One of the things that we've always seen is, there's a lot of funds out there that are like, hey, we'll give you money, but that's it. They don't do, and there's the old saying that's like, money's cheap.
Yeah.
Yes, that's fantastic that someone's going to give you money to make your demo, to make your, to self-publish or whatever. But if they don't have, the feedback and the tools to help support, these teams all the way through the process, I mean, it's not pointless, but you're leaving a lot on the table. Tell us more about how that works, and we can get into, how people apply and all that sort of stuff. But let's do a little deeper dive on that whole accelerator.
Yeah, absolutely, Jay. So completely agree. That whole concept that people may or may not have heard of when it comes to investors and the types of investors that you bring in. There's a whole category of investors, and no disrespect intended, money is great, but the dumb money investor, right? And somebody who's just cutting a check, and maybe they're going to be a cheerleader online and post something about it, but that's it, right? They aren't able to provide anything to help you with the business of your game, much less the creative or building a team or any of that. If you go that route, you really are sort of doing yourself a disservice, because it's you got to think of like, okay, not just am I getting money, that's half of it, but what's the opportunity cost of that money? What am I leaving on the table, right? And we're seeing, I think, especially as we head into this market now, where money is starting to become maybe a little tighter, or there may be some more macro trends that are making it difficult for companies to succeed. It's more important than ever to get your financing from people that can bring more than just the money, people that can understand, okay, what is it like to build a business? What advice can we give when it comes to everything from business formation to, the design of it, or the production of it, help networking to get talent in. And then also, really importantly, a lot of people never think about this, because who wants to think about your, having trouble with your startup or your company? But how is that investor or that source of financing going to help you when things get tough, right? If it doesn't go as planned, are they just going to be nowhere to be found and just pushing to try to get something out the door so they can tell their investors that, oh, it launched and it failed, and then we'll move on and we'll write it off? Or are they knowledgeable enough to say, hey, we've seen this, we've got other companies we've worked with, let's connect you with some other founders, we're going to help you, we're going to be there for you to help you through it? And that's really where we're coming from, is how can we help people through all of that, right? And
it's in many ways, you see some of the investors, and I'm with you, I'm not going to put all of them, because there are some fantastic folks out there, and I know because I hang out with them and I see them at these conferences. But there are some who almost have that publisher mentality from 20 years ago. And it's like, we're going to let you do whatever you want to do, but we're going to invest in 20 games, and we're going to hope 2 of them pay for the rest, the other 18. And that's harder and harder to do these days, because it's one of those that's like, you've got to keep putting out good titles along the way. And, even in some of the pitch sessions that I've done lately, you can see there's this fine line between, they have the money to make the game, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with the game technically or anything else, but it doesn't have that little spark or that hook that's going to take it to the next level. And that's one of the things that we see, so often. And so the more that folks can do to say, okay, look, here's some things that you can do along the way on the production side or the design side, and be aware of these types of games coming out. That's what really, makes the difference. And I don't understand these investors that don't do it anyway, because if they don't give that sort of support, they're shooting themselves in the foot, from the get-go.
Yeah, I mean, they really are. And, it's like, I mean, it's a little bit of kind of game theory and thinking about where, what is their motivation and whatnot. It's, is this investor's motivation just kind of to collect a fee, a management fee from the fund, right, that they're running, and then once that fund is depleted, they'll turn around and raise another one, or are they really looking at making a success right out of it, and they're looking at the bigger opportunity of having successful ventures come out of their fund. And yeah, I mean, I think that's important stuff for people to ask. And it's really tough when you're raising money to see past just the check and really try to ask, well, what's your motivation? How can you help me? And, that's where we feel there's an opportunity for kind of an accelerator that we're, have put out there. And we've already funded a few companies to get their games in there. And we've got such a good network of people now that we've worked with over the years. It's like, well, let's tap that network to help developers, right? Not just have this great network for business development for ourselves, but let's open it up and really help the indie community out there. And that's kind of where this is coming from. And then you talked about data and making smart decisions, and that's something else where it's like, yeah, we see, as I mentioned earlier, this is a great opportunity to see thousands of games, see the industry at scale, different genres, different platforms, different markets. So let's start using some of that information to help companies as well make smart decisions as they're making their games and their go-to-market strategies.
It is. I had a thought there, Chris, and then it just completely floated straight out of my brain. Oh, yeah. All right. So are y'all getting in at early stage, late stage? What point do you all get invested in? Like, what's the sweet spot for the accelerator?
Yep. Yeah, that's a good question, Jay. And what's cool is our funding sort of arm of the company. We have kind of a business line called funding, and it has Accelerator as part of that. So is Funding Club. And we have a tie. We kind of are connected with a VC, a venture group called Joystick Ventures. So really what's cool is we can look at games at any stage and then sort of direct them to the sort of the channel that makes the most sense, right? And with the accelerator, it's early stage, and whether it's great concept or maybe even an early demo, but it's definitely early stage. And then how can we help you get going from there? It's not enough. It's truly an accelerator. We're not funding enough to do like a full cycle development on your project. It's enough to get a great concept, get a demo together, get something that you can take to then secure the rest of the funding that you would need, whether that's through these other channels that we have or out on your own or through the network, whatever it is, the advisors that we're bringing to you, through the accelerator. So.
We're very familiar with Joystick because we've had Yvonne and Marcella both on. I think before I left, those were the two previous podcasts. They're fantastic, and Yvonne was down in Mexico with us as well. So yes, and again, it gets back to the whole working with people that you enjoy working with us too, because they're just good folks. So where do people go to apply to the accelerator? Are y'all taking or you're doing like cohorts at a time, or how is it all structured?
Yeah, no, it's open. We kind of have a minimum commitment throughout the year. And gosh, I'm probably going to get the number wrong. I think it was about 3 million a year we're committing to. Could be, could go up, could go down, whatever. But just through our website, through Xsolla.com, Xsolla.com, and you can just direct from there. Look at funding and accelerator, and you'll find all of it.
All right. And so now to go, full circle, so to speak, we've talked about the stuff that you all do to help, developers find publishers, find funding, that sort of stuff. But you also have a bunch of tools that can help people self-publish and go directly to consumers. What's the difference? Who should be doing which route? It's good that y'all cover both, but how do you know which way to go?
Yeah, absolutely, Jay. I mean, look, the bulk of the business that we run, right? The thing that's actually keeping the lights on is our commerce side of the business, and that's the macro kind of bucket that all of these direct to consumer solutions apply to. Funding is the things that we had just talked about, and then any company can use our commerce solutions. So if you had to say like what is your core value proposition, it is we're helping companies go direct to consumer and generate more revenue and reach a bigger audience, right? And also kind of take control of the business of your game. And so we provide all these. I know those are like whatever general kind of catchphrasy things, but we offer a pay station. Sort of API that connects to over 700 different payment methods. And I'm not trying to sell us. There's other options out there. People can certainly do their research. But when I talked earlier about connecting to all these gamers that can't spend on games, that's something that we've really leaned into. And people might be shocked to learn that in a lot of countries, people are doing things like cash kiosks or prepaid cards or super apps or different social apps that they're all spending through and connecting to their games. So we connect into all of that. And in fact, we just connected into Alipay, which is Alipay Plus, which is got, I think, 1 billion users throughout Southeast Asia. So that's all cool. And there's a bunch of other things. We have products that help you with subscriptions, with single sign-on for your users, a login system, sort of a game launcher, website builder, all of that, in-game store, plug-in, and all this stuff that works in the back end, and you just plug it in, and now you can actually run that kind of commerce through your game or through your site. So.
Wait, so you're saying that Google didn't pay you all $360 million to not do your own app store like they did Activision and somebody else in the news this morning?
Yeah, I don't understand, Jay. They just don't seem to be that afraid of us, man.
I
And
don't. It's like, every time Embracer launches a press release saying they bought all these companies, I call my buddy over there and I go, once again, I wasn't on that list. I don't know why you keep avoiding this.
yeah, exactly. No,
The
companies like Google and Apple and Steam, Epic Game Store, all the third-party platforms, those are awesome. And we are always telling people you should absolutely be launching your game there. They've got massive audiences, right? It's a great platform to launch into. But at the same time, there's a whole avenue of growth that people often forget about, which is going direct yourself. And I think we're seeing a significant uptick in the appetite to do that from not just the big players, but from all companies now. Whether it's mobile as a result of IDFA and ATT making it much harder to acquire users. If you're looking at lifetime value of your players, and why would you acquire them and then just give them to a platform? So there's a lot of stuff that makes sense to sort of bring them over and do your own direct relationship with your players, and we can talk more about the benefits of all of that. Regardless of how you do it, it's just super beneficial.
Yeah, I mean, but it's. I literally had this conversation this morning with a longtime friend of mine in the industry, and we were talking about how we're almost accustomed at this point to developers not really thinking through their branding and their image and this type of relationship. But we also see a ton of publishers that come out now that do the same thing. They have some, wacky name, and then there's no real, theme behind what they're doing and all this other stuff. Talk a bit about why that branding and that relationship with the consumer is important, because I think it does. It gets completely, washed away, and it's not something that everybody thinks of.
Yeah, I mean, it's really important for a few different reasons. One is discovery. We know that on going through third-party platforms with the number of games that are launched every year, it's incredibly hard to get discovered. And if you're sort of building your own direct-to-consumer presence or channel, then you really can increase that discovery, because you'll have an audience of players that know you, that you have a direct relationship with, that you can communicate with directly, and you can let them know that, hey, here's a new game that's coming out from us, or through, from one of our partners, or here's a big update that's coming, and you can engage in kind of a direct relationship, and that is very, very powerful from a retention or re-engagement standpoint. And it's also really powerful when it comes to monetization as well, where you can really start to offer a whole host of options that you can't if you're sort of gated by a platform, that has its own idea of what should or shouldn't work, or they're trying to control the relationship themselves. So if you're a publisher or a developer, whether you have one game or a slate of games, having that direct connection to your community, it's going to allow you to promote yourself better, right? Have more engagement whenever you release something new. And then you can really ramp up just not just to be not mercenary about it, but really the financial side of it. So you can start to do things like offer bundles and promotions, or even custom pricing, and different higher price points on packages. And that really starts to generate more revenue for you. A case in point, we have this thing called Web Shop for mobile games, and that's where we're helping mobile game companies put up a online presence as a new sort of channel, right? Not to compete with the app stores, but it's a new, kind of porting over to a new channel, but they can get online. And it's not just about throwing up a store, but you create an actual point of engagement with your players. And you can offer, for instance, on the App Store, the max price point on any item is like I think $99. But if you're doing it yourself, we've seen partners do $999 packages that get bought up by their players, and they're able to bundle different things together across either a single game or multiple games that you can't do necessarily on a third-party platform, and that generates more revenue. So there's all these tools out there that are really, from an e-commerce standpoint, that people can lean into if they're going direct themselves. So building up the audience, building up a great connection, people know who you are, they can be aware of what you're doing, right? You can talk directly to them, and then you can really use all the power of e-commerce to get the most out of that relationship.
Yeah, and it's ridiculously important now, because it's, we always tell developers, it's like, prepare for the worst. I mean, wish for the best, but prepare for the worst. And some of these higher end, even mid-sized indie publishers, they see 2,000 to 3,000 games a year that are pitched to them, and they're going to take what, 7? It's absolutely crazy. So yes, as an indie, you should obviously be pitching and going and trying to find a publisher and all that sort of stuff, but you have to be able to have a backup plan as well. And it's the age-old rule: don't go and reinvent the wheel. I mean, if these things are out there and they exist, then for God's sakes, use them. All right, so I'm going to segue into a question we had from Facebook, along the lines of building up your relationships and building up, your communities and that sort of stuff. What do you see as the best way to go about recruiting beta testers for your indie game?
Yeah, that is a great question. Look, there's a couple of different ways. There's the traditional route of there's companies and services that can help you with beta testers, but that's going to cost you money, right? So I think the best way of doing that is early, like even from the beginning, when you're starting to think about building your game, just start talking about it, right? It's really easy to get heads down and then realize far too late, like, oh man, I need to get out there and start talking about my game. Getting out there and talking about it isn't just about building up awareness for when it launches and for people to buy it, but you can build up that awareness and get a community of people that can start being interested in testing your game and beta testing it. And it's, you can do that without spending a ton of money. It just takes time, right? And find out where your audience is. And that's another kind of point, and this is a point that goes for beta testing, but also for when you launch your game. Take the time to figure out where the audience for your game is. Too many times people, the same way you don't think about launching your game, you're like, oh, I'm just going to throw it up on a store and I'm done. It's like, well, you should think more about that. But also, what channels are your players in? A lot of people just think, oh, well, they're on whatever. They're on this one social media. Maybe they're on Facebook, or maybe they're on Twitch or Instagram or whatever, because I read that somewhere before. It's like, well, no, when early on, when you're starting to make your game, put feelers out onto these different platforms and see what feedback you're getting, which one's working, and then start a conversation and just start building up that relationship. And even if it's only a couple of people, they can become advocates for you and start to grow. And it's that sort of, K factor of a social, from a social standpoint. You get a couple of people that are really on board with what you're doing, and they're going to bring more people in. And that's a great way to start beta testing through that. And then, going just old school friends and family, just, don't be afraid to ask the people around you and start getting feedback. I think a lot of times people get caught up in thinking that beta testing has to happen at scale. And, while there's certainly a place for that, even getting just a couple people to play your game and watch them playing it, if you can do it in person or do it even, connect online and over Zoom or whatever, and watch them play and see how they react, you can get a lot of valuable information. So it's never too early to build a relationship with players to leverage for beta testing, and start with, start small, and it'll grow from there.
I still keep thinking about that kid at Gamescom, and I forget who the developer was that tweeted it, that the kid went and played their game and then came back and played later, and they're like, oh, do you like it? He goes, no, I'm just going around and I'm playing all these games until I can break them. And he's like, okay. And he goes, why are you here? He's like, well, because yours is the easiest one to do that on. And I'm like, there's two kinds of kids that you can get to help beta test, and one of them is the one that's going to tell you no matter what that it's awesome, I love it, it's better than Fortnite. Those aren't the ones. It's the kid that likes to break your shit. That's the one that that's the one that you need. And it's building that. So many of these developers get intimidated by just by saying marketing. It's like, oh well, we'll do that once the game starts. It's like, well, no, you're done at that point. That's too late. But you don't have to drop thousands of dollars in this stuff. Even simple KPI testing on Facebook can be done $50. I mean, you can get a number in there to see if things are happening or not. And so it's not something that you have to spend a ton of time every day on. But yeah, building up that community for not only for beta testing purposes, but also for just building those advocates are that's some of the most important stuff out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on something about that triggered a thought for me as well, which you talked about that fear, right? And of when you talk about marketing and people get kind of, well, I want to wait till later. One of the things that I used to always tell my producers and the teams that I would work with when it came to testing a game early, like beta testing it, even with a small group, there would be a lot of resistance, and I'd say, look, because they would say, well, it's not quite ready, or I don't want to get negative feedback yet. And it's like, well, I'd much rather get some negative feedback way upstream than wait until I launch the game and that negative feedback is worldwide, right? It's like, I'll take my lumps early when I can adjust and make some changes, because that's what you want, right? You want that kid who's going to try to break your game early. And, yeah, it may suck, right, to get that feedback, but when do you want that feedback? Because you're going to get it. You're going to get it sooner or later, right?
That's
so when
it.
you want that to happen. Yeah,
that's absolutely it. And so many times, and this was true on games that I produced and executive produced years ago. It's like you get so close to the game that you miss stuff that someone who's coming in new will catch. We were talking right before we went live about Heather, our friend and our wonderful program director for IGB now. And when she came on, she started pointing out things that were like on our Eventbrite page or our website. And she's like, why does it say this and not this? I'm like, I don't know. That's what we wrote and that's what I've had, but I I am involved in this. I'm not, I don't have the luxury of somebody with outside eyes. When she came in, she's like, okay, we got to fix this. But that's the same thing. It's absolutely far better to get that brutal feedback early on versus waiting until you're getting ready to launch, and then you end up with that dreaded mixed review stage on Steam, and that's never ever good. So you've worked with obviously a lot of developers and publishers. You see stuff coming through the pitch thing. What do you think is the biggest mistake? What is the most frequent thing that you see the devs doing wrong when they're looking for an investor or a publisher?
Yeah, I would say for me, the biggest thing is not leaning into or not articulating or even not knowing what it is that is unique about your game. And too often people focus on, they spend too many cycles working on stuff that is already a solved problem, right? And instead of, if I'm looking at a new concept or a new game, it's like I don't need to see all the sort of secondary systems and mechanics and all of that. I get inventory systems, I get all of that. What's unique about your game, right? What are the 1, 2, 3 things that are going to be real key hooks? What are the difficult things that you're looking to solve, or unique things you're going to bring to the table that is going to make this game stand out? And and how have you solved them, or how are you going to solve them? Right? Don't waste a bunch of time showing me all this other stuff that is already a solved problem, and every other game has, right? This, what I call the secondary sort of layer of game mechanics, just the commodity level stuff. Like, really focus on what is it that's unique. And as we were talking about beta testing, not just what you think is unique, but I want to know that you've actually gone out and kind of proven that this is unique. You've either got a good sort of go-to-market message that can resonate with people and make them, convey your hook right from your brain into in a way that people actually respond to. And I don't mean a polished marketing campaign, but like, can you not just articulate to me over 20 minutes what's unique, but have you been able to distill it down to an elevator pitch that is like, okay, this makes sense. I'm responding to it. I can see other people respond to it. And, I think that's just one of the things that a lot of people surprisingly don't spend a lot of time on.
Yeah, I mean, you have to ask. I mean, we look at games, and whether it's a Metroidvania or, I mean, those and platformers in general tend to stick out because we sit down and we look at a game and it may look fantastic, but you always have to go back and say, okay, why is someone going to play this versus playing Hollow Knight or Celeste or something along those lines? And if you can't answer that, there's your first problem, because that's one of the things that is absolutely so important. Because that's the question that we're all asking. And you have to have it nailed down when you're dealing with, companies that are seeing 2,000-3,000 games a year, and they only want to pick, the very best. You have to be able to articulate that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you really do. And you touched on something as well, which is often people confuse articulating it with like, oh, okay, I've identified the genres and it's a mashup of this and that. There we go. There's my pitch. It's like, okay, that's a start. But now let's go a little bit deeper. What does that actually mean? Right. And that's where that kind of focus and really knowing what it is that you want to build. Because also, from at least from my perspective, if you don't have a real handle on what it is you want to build, then that's kind of a risk from a development and a production standpoint. Like, how much time are you actually how many cycles are you going to burn trying to get to somewhere where, I'd rather come in and meet you when you're already there, right? Versus, okay, you're going to spend all these cycles trying to figure out, this hook that you might need because you just started with a genre mashup. So just, it's you don't have to have everything solved, but have an idea, right, of what it is that really is going to be that.
And boil it down like our good friends over at Pitching do. And I know they just did. I hated. I was like on the road that day, so I didn't get to like fully get involved in it. But yeah, if you can go on there and pitch your game in a single tweet, that's what you need to be able to do. Um, got a wonderful question from Indigo Doyle on Twitch. I had to think. I always want to say Twitter, but it's Twitch. All right. So, what are tips for first-time indie devs when you're going and you're pitching to publishers and investors? Is it better to start early, or is that going to be a strike against you if you go in too early?
I'm a believer that you should start early, especially if you're new at it, because it may not go well, but you're going to learn a lot and you're going to make connections. And you can always come back to, well, I was going to say, you can always come back to an investor and pitch again. If they don't want you to come back, then you've also learned something that it's probably not somebody that you want to work with because, it's just not a good fit. So I would recommend going early, use it as an ability to hone, your pitching skills, start to understand what it is that they're looking for. And honestly, you're going to be talking with some smart people that see, as you do, Jay, see thousands of games, and they're going to give you some, really valuable feedback that you can then take and reincorporate into your pitch and into your design, so that you're that much stronger and you can come back. If it doesn't work the first time, you can always come back with a stronger proposition, and you'll know what it is they're looking for. And this example is kind of on the bigger end with like big, VCs and equity firms and big money transactions, but it applies in this case to starting early with as an indie dev. Something someone had told me, a really smart banker had told me a while ago was, look, okay, you never want to be coming to a VC firm or an equity firm looking for money and it being the first time you've talked to them. Because if you show up and say, hey, we're ready to do a transaction, we want to raise $100 million or whatever it is, or in this case of an indie, we want to raise maybe 50,000 or something or 10,000. If you show up for the very first time, these people don't know you, right? They don't understand who you are. They don't have a sense of who you are as a person or a team or what it is you're trying to do. So it's a very high bar to cross at that point to actually get them to do anything. But if you've taken the time to get to know them, you've talked with them, you've maybe pitched them 3 or 4 or 5 times. By the time you go, when you really have something, you're a known quantity, and they're like, "Oh yeah, Jay, we've been talking for a year, and I've seen your progress and your resiliency. I kind of beat you up on a few pitches, and you've come back and listened, and you've incorporated my feedback. That tells me a lot about you as a person, and a lot of times people want to invest in the person just as much as they want to invest in the idea. So start early, use it as a learning, build a vehicle to learn, and as a way to network and get everything lined up so that these people know you and then they are willing to write a check when the time is right.
And that is so important in this industry because despite the fact that it's a gigantic multi-billion-dollar industry, it's still a very tight-knit industry, and so relationships matter. And that's what I tell developers as well. It's like, yes, start early, but remember that the majority of that early work that you're going to do is going to be on relationship building, not necessarily getting the game published, because that publisher or investor, especially if you're brand new, you haven't done anything, they're going to want to see some fairly advanced playable versions to make sure you can do it. But that doesn't necessarily mean you have to wait until then. You just need to understand that that's when the decision is going to be made. But yeah, absolutely, getting out there and talking to people and building those relationships from day one, because yeah, that's
Exactly.
all of this industry.
And what so many people, especially if their first time, trying to go out there and get investments, what a lot of people don't realize is there's a lot of different types of investors who, there's investors that are good for certain genres or certain platforms. And you kind of need to, I know you have a great, sort of list of contacts and things like that within the industry. but it's tough for people to sift through that. And, getting out early allows you, it's a two-way interview, right? It's not just you trying to convince people to give you money. It's you trying to find the right publisher or the right investor who knows your genre, knows your platform, can really help you, right? And is going to help your business succeed.
And, shameless plug, I did just drop the link in our chat here. We keep a list of, it varies from year to year, 650 to 700 some publishers in the industry. Just go to the powellgroupconsulting.com and you can download that thing for free. And that's where you should start. And yeah, there's plenty. And some of these things that you're going to submit, they are not going to be taken, but it's all about learning and iterating and say, okay, look, we did this and it didn't work, and then we tried this and got a little bit of reaction out of it. It's nothing that's going to happen overnight. But yeah, you're right. It's like people want to do business with people they know, and people that they feel comfortable working with.
Yeah.
All right, hold on. Just had the heating people show up, and that's why I'm tweeting at the side. So aside from going out, and talking to folks and getting out there early, what should they focus on when it comes to the actual pitch? Because I see all kinds of pitches, and some of them, it's like I just want to get a hold of the people on the other side and go, what were you thinking when you did this? Because this doesn't solve the question. What do they need to focus on? What are the important parts of that pitch, whether it's to a publisher or an investor?
Yeah. I'm at the end of the day, something that people can put their hands on, right? And play with, and something that demonstrates your ability to execute against that core hook, right? That you're coming in with the game. Something that, at least from my perspective, I appreciate stuff that's kind of get me straight to the core gameplay hook, right? I don't need to go through a bunch of other stuff that I see in every other game. I don't need to go through a lengthy character creation, go a bunch of character creation stages, or go through a bunch of story, or and unless you're a story game, that's different. But get me straight to the action, the thing that's really going to hook me, that you told me is your hook, and now I can jump right in and experience it. And it shows like, oh, okay, you're able to, you do know what it is you're trying to do, and I can get a sense that this actually is going to work. And then be able to craft the story, like all the other stuff that goes with the game, you can talk to around it, right? So be prepared to talk to some of those secondary elements of the game. And okay, how is your progression going to work? Have you thought about monetization? Does your monetization strategy match, the gameplay that you're doing here, and your progression systems? So those are things I kind of look for. And then, it never hurts to have, you don't need to have sort of like a ton of high-end visuals in the demo itself, but you should have some sort of hero art or something that shows me, okay, here's what the game is going to look like, and it could just be a single render or something, right? But that gives me a sense that, okay, you do know what direction you're going to stylistically and visually with the game, because that feeds back into, do you really understand your genre and your player and all of that? So that's kind of it for me.
It's always a lot, and we can always do like 3-hour talks on all of this stuff, because for every example, there's other examples where the complete opposite worked. And it's like, I love when I get that question. It's like, so what does a good publisher deal look like? You have no idea. It looks like the relationship and the deal that gets you both to market and everybody makes money and everybody's happy. But how that's structured is completely different. And it's because every situation in this industry is different. There's not boilerplate ways to do this stuff. So switching gears back to the consumer facing side, what are some of the things, aside from the brand building, which we know, what are some of the mistakes, the key things that they need to be thinking about early on when it comes to monetization and building a web presence and all of that other stuff, where should they be putting that? And, where do you see people stumbling on that side?
Yeah, I think I firmly believe you can never start thinking about those things too early. And just as important as it is to have a great idea for a gameplay hook, I think you need to start thinking about, well, what is the monetization strategy I'm going to use, and because that will inform the types of systems you build, right? And it'll inform like what kind of content you need and the resources you're going to need. So I think thinking about that stuff early, thinking about what kind of hooks you're going to have to help your game, whether it's with influencers and streamers. Like, are you building hooks in there that can make it easier for them to show your game? All of that stuff. You really can't think about that too early. In my mind, all of that kind of go to market stuff, whether it's the business or the marketing or the influencer pieces, that's almost another pillar of the design that needs to be there from the beginning.
Yeah.
Because if you're thinking about that stuff halfway through or near the end, you can just really get misaligned, and it can really break down and cause you a lot of issues. So, yeah. And then, when it comes to stuff like a web shop, or when you're thinking about, okay, I want to do some direct to consumer stuff myself, you need to, if you're thinking you're just going to put a website up with a buy button to buy your game, you're going to fail, right? It's like, okay, don't think about it as just a revenue thing. Think about it as, I want to build an online hub that I can really create a sense of community and engagement, for my players, where players can come, they can learn about the game, they can have a direct relationship with, me, the developer, and they can learn things. They're going to get access to things here that they can't get elsewhere, and you do all of that right, and then you can sell them, right. You're going to have the point there is create some sort of online hub that keeps people engaged, keeps them coming back. And the longer they're there and the more engaged and more connected they feel to you, the more chances you're going to have to do some sort of transaction with them. So thinking about it kind of that way, instead of, revenue first, but community first, and the rest of it.
So if the developer's thinking about the end user and going direct to consumers first, and they do go and build this stuff and they have a plan in place for going directly, is that going to hurt them down the line if they start looking for a publisher or an investor, or is that seen as a perk or bonus, or how is that taken later on?
Yeah, it's that's a great question. If it's successful enough, they won't need a publisher. Right? You can certainly leverage pre-orders and things like that to get early financing for your game. But no, look, it won't hurt you. If any publisher worth their salt, if you're coming to them with a game that has a pre-established community, I mean, they're gonna it's a validation point, right? That there's something here, right? There's also different types, like you mentioned there's different types of deals, right? So if you've taken the time and built up a community for your game during development, you can still go to a publisher, and maybe it's more of a distribution deal, right? Where they're more like, okay, they're going to take a smaller piece, but they're going to focus more on scaling what you've already built, right? And more around the messaging and the advertising. So there's just a lot of ways, and honestly, it just gives you more leverage when you go in, and it's better off for you.
It's like I got started in this industry 25 years ago doing country by country distribution deals for games back in the olden days when we had to put them in a box and send them somewhere.
Yes.
And it's I love the fact that we're almost going back to that now, because there isn't a single publisher who does every market around the world really well. If you can get that base and have that leverage, like you said, you go in and you say, look, we've already got a Discord full of 300,000 people and a nice social media presence and wish list and blah blah blah. We basically just need a company to do distribution and maybe a little bit of marketing along the way in these territories, and then you can go and pick one for North America and Western Europe, and another one for Eastern Europe, and one for South America, one for Southeast Asia. You're going to see so much revenue. It's more work to get it up and going, but you're going to see so much revenue, on the end. All right, so we are like running up against time here. So now I'm going to ask like the very important question: what tools and services and new cool stuff can we see from Xsolla, in the next year or so to help these developers out?
Sure. So, look, at Xsolla, first and foremost, we focus only on the games industry, and we're always talking with game companies to understand what their needs are, and keeping a real eye on the trends of the industry. And that's kind of our sort of hook, right, and our competitive advantage. So from that, this past year, we had this web shop for mobile games, which has been incredibly successful. So that was something that really helped get into the mobile side of the business. And going forward, we're looking at a couple of trends. There's obviously Web3. I know it's going through like this horrible phase right now, but we have created a number of solutions or products that will enable you to do Web3 commerce, whether it's NFTs or crypto or other things like that. So for companies that are interested in that, that's one avenue. We're also, though, looking at things like what's going on with the creator community and the creator economy, especially as you look at. And I hate to use. I'm not trying to use buzzwords. It's not a metaverse, but whatever the heck that means to me, that all that means is a closer relationship, right, between creator and player, or developer and creator, and so creating more tools that help put the power into the creator's hands. And then we're also doing some really cool things around just being able to work more closely with super apps and telcos and things like that, really expanding the market out there. And then, we talked about Accelerator, which is really exciting, and we're leaning into that more. And yeah, so we have a bunch of stuff that we're working on. And then we have just our core business as well around the commerce that we're always building up on and making more robust.
All right, so you opened the door, and I'm going to have one final question here before we let you go.
All right.
How do you see the whole implosion of FTX in the crypto world? Because when the new CEO comes in, and he was the guy that had to clean up Enron's mess years ago, and he says this is the biggest mess and poor management he's ever seen. Obviously, that's a high bar to hit. How do you see that impacting the Web3 market and the crypto market in games, for the next 6 months to a year?
Yeah, I think, look, I think if you're thinking of Web3 as this is going to be a hook that's going to get me a bunch of financing, or it's going to be a quick get rich quick scheme because I'm going to be able to create overvalued assets, then you're screwed, right? That's not the way to approach it. So, I think for people looking to go that road, definitely not going to be working out too well. But I think what it is sort of doing is it's kind of flushing out a lot of that, and really forcing, not forcing, but leaving behind the people that are looking at the technology and thinking about, okay, how does this relate to gameplay? How does it relate to the player experience? And how is it going to help me create something new and unique? And, I think back to, we've seen these cycles when new technologies come in. We saw it on mobile, right? Where at first there's a big cohort of people that just try to force an old model, like the previous model, onto it, right? Whether it was AAA games onto mobile and just premium content, and that didn't work. And they don't take the time to look at the technology and the platform and say, well, what's unique about it? There's the form factor, there's the benefits it brings to players, there's all these things, and what new stuff can we build around that that's fun? And I think that kind of approach is the thing that's going to still succeed in the long run. But yeah, it's a scary time for all of that. So my hope is it chases away all the get rich quick kind of mentality, mindsets, and leaves room for the people that are really trying to build, really cool stuff.
And it's like I've said from day one, the innovation on that side of the industry is not going to come from EA and Ubisoft and Activision. It's going to come from, an indie team doing exactly what you just said. It's like, how can I use this technology to actually make something better versus I'm going to mint a coin and we're going to make millions and then dump it and be gone.
Yeah, and I think just one of my pet things is I think the opportunity to use some of this Web3 tech, whether it's NFTs or whatever, to really build a stronger relationship with your community and really blur the line even more between player and developer. I think there's some real potential there, right? And where the community becomes part of the development, and there's something powerful there. So yeah, I'm excited to see it.
We just need some smart people to figure out exactly what that is and make it fun. Otherwise, it's not going to matter. So, well, Chris, thank you so much for coming on and taking time out of your busy day. Where can everybody go? I'm going to assume Xsolla.com and find out information on the Accelerator and the Funding Club and the tools and all this other good stuff.
Absolutely, Jay. And we're at all the shows as well. So, you can always find somebody from Xsolla at one of the shows worldwide. We've got people everywhere. And Xsolla.com, XSOLLA is the home.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Chris. I guess I'm going to lead us out. Jay?
Yes.
All right. Thank you all so much. And thank you to Tripwire Presents for sponsoring. And of course, thank you, Xsolla, for sponsoring us for this extended period of time. If you want to come into our Discord at discord.gg/indiegamebusiness, I think we'll let you. We'll let you come in there. Yeah. You can come in there and hang out with industry veterans, industry experts. Also, make sure that you are following us and liking us on all of the platforms. Twitch. We're here on LinkedIn. We are here on YouTube. Thank you so much, everybody.
We're actually on Mastodon now. I have done nothing with it. I know nothing about it, but technically, Indie Game Business is on Mastodon. So yeah.
I've been seeing a lot of stuff about Mastodon. They're like, it's so slow. And then someone said, well, imagine 1 million people coming into your little town and trying to order a sandwich at the only sandwich shop. That's exactly what's happening. So, yeah.
All right, everybody. We will see you next week, I believe. No, not because it's Thanksgiving.
Yes, Thanksgiving.
We're not going to see you for a couple of weeks, but we will. Chris, thank you. Much love to you and Justin and everybody over there at Xsolla. We truly appreciate everything you've done for us. You've helped
Likewise,
us grow.
Jay, Dan, thank you.
We'll talk soon.